Why am I not seeing myself? There I am. Okay, fantastic. So hang on one second, everybody. Just bear with me for a moment as I don't know why this is becoming so difficult here. Bear with me for a moment. This other device is not cooperating. Okay, there we go. Okay. One more second. Okay, fine. So let's talk about, hold on, one more thing. I get my face in the frame here. All right, it looks like I'm kind of set up for today's conversation. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you, and I'm really, really looking forward to sharing some tips with you about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And that is, it's a leadership topic in particular, but let me get more specific. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a hard time working through what I need to do on these different fronts here. But we're going to talk about overcoming the fear of failure, overcoming the fear of failure. So that's, hang on one second. Okay. I think I finally am set up here. I'm getting used to this, and I hope that you are prepared to tolerate my imperfection as I get better. So I want to talk about overcoming the fear of failure. This is a real issue that a lot of people have, leaders and others. You might have heard of imposter syndrome, which is something where we're not sure that we really have the goods. We're not really sure that we are who we think we are, so to speak, when we show up at the workplace. And so what I'm trying to do here is talk about when we as leaders show up for others, how do we show up? What is our mindset, let's call it? And ultimately, is there a way by which that we can deal with what everybody struggles with, which is what's called the fear of failure? So fear of failure at its essence is about what is it really about? It's kind of like, I'm really smart. I was promoted. People believe in me. I believe in myself fundamentally, but I still worry about a project, about onboarding somebody new, about the culture that I'm creating at the workplace. And so fear of failure is all about how do I overcome the natural elements of a failure, which are inevitable. And so before I continue, I want to thank everybody who's with me. Sorry, I was a little bit disoriented earlier trying to get that other device set up, but I'm looking to really engage with everybody here. So whether you're on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, if you're going to see this somewhere else, regardless, I want this to be as interactive as possible. So with that said, let's get right into it. And let's talk about fear of failure, why we have this problem, and how we can overcome it. So it might manifest as making the wrong decision. You're afraid of possibly letting other people down. That's a frequent one for people, right? Letting other people down. They have high expectations of me. Frankly, I have high expectations of myself. And so the question becomes, how do I, when I lead something, I'm afraid that maybe people will feel like I underdelivered, or in some way I'm not doing my job the way that I'm supposed to. People will think I'm incapable or unworthy. And so the problem here is not just a personal issue. It's not just about my ego. It's also about letting other people down, or my fear that by letting other people down, I somehow am less than whole. And I guess more importantly, what starts to happen is that I create a culture within my organization where this fear, let me put it this way. It's not just about I'm afraid of failing. It's about, in order for me to, quote, not fail, sometimes I feel like I have to compensate. I need to go out of my way to demonstrate that I'm not failing. What does that mean? I don't take feedback, or I do all the work myself. That's a big one we're going to talk about. So what starts to happen is that I, as the leader, the tone setter, the person who creates the culture, what I'm doing is I'm setting an example for other people. And if that's a bad example, if that's an example that doesn't serve them, doesn't serve me, then what starts to happen, right? What starts to happen is that I don't do my very best job, and I create that same type of culture and expectations for others on my team. And then they, as a result, start to act similarly. So it creates this negative ripple effect. So now that we have talked a little bit, and again, for those of you just joining, we are focusing today on overcoming the fear of failure, which all of us have. But as a leader, it looks different. As a leader, it has greater implications because I'm not only worried about myself and how people will view me, I am worried about how others ultimately, I guess I'm worried in a different kind of way. Maybe I'll say it like that. I don't know if that was super clear, but I am going to unpack it. And in so doing, I think it's going to create more clarity and more practical applications for us all. So let's dive in a little bit further and see how we can take this fear of failure, understand it, and ultimately do something concrete with it. So I want to tell you four powerful truths about the fear of failure in leadership. Right? What are some of the realities? We talk about the fear of failure. What does it practically mean, and how do we address it? So let's go one step at a time. Number one, the first fear of failure is that when we are controlling, when we are micromanaging, when we are not delegating, oftentimes that is an example of fear of failure. It's interesting when I talk to people about delegation, because that's a topic that I present on frequently. So the question is, why don't you delegate more? Or people will say, I'd ask a question, I would delegate more if, right? So what's that next line? What's that if? What's the thing that we want, that people say is the main reason why they're not delegating more? And I think the answer for many of us is because I don't trust the people. I don't trust others around me. And where does that absence of trust come from? Part of it is I'm afraid that if I give it to somebody else, that I will ultimately fail because they're not good enough to do the job, especially the way that I would do it. And sometimes it might be a matter of me being a perfectionist, but that absence, that unwillingness to give control to somebody else is often an indication that I'm afraid to fail. So you got to have to check yourself a little bit, right? So if I'm tired, that's a symptom for something, right? It might be that I'm not sleeping enough. It might be that I'm not getting the proper nutrients, not enough sunlight, whatever that is, right? So tired, yawning, that's a symptom of something. Feeling sluggish is a symptom of something. If I'm not delegating, that may be a symptom that I am not allowing others to take responsibility, that I'm being too controlling. Okay, so let's unpack that just a little bit more. So it looks like micromanaging, not delegating, needing to own every decision, every outcome, every detail. And why is that? So as we talked about, often it's because it feels too risky to let others do things. It feels too risky. So, by the way, if you are not the leader, but you are led by others, if there are other people who you feel are doing exactly what we're describing, one of the things I definitely encourage you to do is to lead up, is to call them on it. But you also have to be aware of where it's coming from. It's not usually bad intentions. It's usually just a reflection of insecurity or a lack of surety that, am I doing the right thing for the right people in the right way? Okay, so the problem, of course, is that when you don't give control to others, you know what happens? Then you're demonstrating a lack of trust. Now, there are a lot of different ways to define trust. I love the Ken Blanchard model, which in effect says, sorry if it's bouncing around a little bit here, that it's ABCD. So able, believable, connected, and dependable. Able is does the person have the ability to do the work? Believable is do you trust what they have to say? Connected is to have good relationships. Do they spend the time connecting with others? Because that's a critical element. And then dependable, are they reliable that they're going to consistently follow through on the things that they say that they will do? And so when you have that model, yet you're controlling, then you're not demonstrating trust. You're not saying, I believe in you. I think you're capable. I think you are the right person for this job, which, by the way, also reduces or caps their growth potential, right? Because a person who is limited in the work that they do, they never see opportunity for growth. And so what they wind up doing is the same old, right? They stay in their box because you've created a box for them. But the intention here is for you to get them out of their box, to get them beyond their comfort zone. You want to grow your people. The only way to grow your people is to give them opportunity. If you're controlling, then you're obviously not doing that. So again, one reason that people are controlling as leaders is because they are afraid of failure. And they think that their failure, their lack of success will come back to them. And so they don't want to get rid of the reins, right? They want to hold on to everything themselves and keep their grip nice and tight. So when you ask yourself, for example, if you're not delegating, sometimes there are other, quote, good reasons to not delegate. Maybe you feel like it's a one-off and it's just not worth it. Or you worry about how much time it's going to take and maybe the length of the project doesn't justify it. But sometimes when you don't delegate, it's because you are trying to hold on to too much control. And if you do that, you lose because you can't do everything, and others lose as well. And so think about the drawback of it won't be perfect, even though let's even assume that you are perfect. But even if that's, regardless, you can't do nearly as much as if you're delegating to others. So holding on to control or holding on to too many things in fear of failure is ultimately going to compromise your capacity for success. So that's reason number one. What's another reason? Another factor here when we talk about fear of failure? It silences innovation. You want your people to think of new ideas. You want your people to push back. You want your people to say, I think we could do this better, smarter, faster. If you are too controlling and you have that fear of failure, what you're basically going to communicate, intentionally or not, is that no new ideas are welcome here, because new ideas are going to upset the apple cart and may push us in a different direction. And I'm very comfortable in my zone, and I feel like I won't fail if I stay in my zone. The problem, of course, is that we know that we need to innovate. The world is moving so fast. And regardless, even if it wasn't, right, who's to say that the method that you're using until now is the very best? With my team, I'm constantly pushing others and encouraging them to push back on me and asking good questions. In fact, I just hired somebody yesterday, and I told her one of the most important roles that you could play for my company is to be a questioner, is to ask, is this in fact the right way that we should be doing things? Or could we be doing it differently and better? Okay, suggesting new things, right? So innovation is going to require experimentation. It's going to require new ways of doing things. It's going to take us out of our comfort zone. It's going to make us feel uncomfortable at times. And it's going to force us to challenge the status quo. And many, many people struggle with that. And that's another reason why this issue of fear of failure becomes so prominent. Okay, because the irony here, it's actually a very rich irony. The irony is that by trying to avoid failure, you actually create failure because you're not trying new things. And a business that stays stuck in the old way of doing things will inevitably fail probably 95 times out of 100 because they're just not staying current with the needs of the moment and expanding their capacity. And I've seen this many, many times. Companies that I coach, before I start to work with them, they've fallen behind for this exact reason. They haven't initiated new possibilities. And so what happens is they get stuck in the same old, and people get frustrated and they want to try new things, but they don't feel like they have a platform to share it. And then what ultimately happens is they get frustrated, they leave, or they just learn that their insight is not welcome. And then all those great ideas go nowhere. And that's really to the detriment of the organization or the company. Another point, the fear isn't even about the failure itself. It's a concern about what it says about me as a person. One of the things that we hate the most or that we fear the most is being judged. That's why they say that fear of public speaking is so significant for people. Why are we so afraid to speak publicly? What are we actually worried about? Like, no one's going to kill us. They're actually rooting for us to succeed. But why do so many people fear the idea of getting up in front of others and sharing their insights, their wisdom, their thoughts? And the answer is because they're afraid of being judged. They're afraid of being evaluated by other people. By the way, if any of this is resonating with you, please hit me up in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Obviously, your reactions are appreciated as well, but let's have a proper conversation about this. Let's make it engaging. So again, the third point is that the fear, it's not about the failure per se, but it's about how it's going to reflect on me. If it doesn't work, they'll lose confidence in me. What if I'm not cut out for this? What if I was never the right choice in the first place? So that comes back to the imposter syndrome that we talked about before. So I want to make an important point that I don't think it can be overstated. And that is that leadership is not about, and never was about, failing. Leadership is about leading through situations and challenges. Nobody expects you to be perfect as a leader. And that's not your job. Your job is not to show up as a, quote, perfect leader. Your job is to take everybody from where you are to where you want to go. Your job is to establish a culture. Your job is to set expectations. Your job is to put everybody in the best position to be successful. And so you have to really think about, are you doing these things? And if that's your number one priority, if that's ultimately what you're most concerned with, for the most part, you're going to be fine. Your people will be fine. You'll be growing them as leaders. Everybody will feel like they're in a great work environment. The engagement will be high. The retention will be high. Very important, because when you lose people, you have to find new people. You have to train them. So much time and money is lost in that process also. So thinking about, why am I afraid of failure? Oftentimes we think it's because it's judgment. However, I have learned through multiple leadership roles that failure is inevitable. I've also learned that how you handle failure, in many cases, is more important than how you acted in the first place. Because again, nobody expects perfection. We all feel that mistakes are inevitable. The question becomes, what is your reaction to it? Have you grown from it? Have you helped people become better as a result of it? Okay, so hold on to that thought for a moment. Now, and by the way, this is great for time management as well as for leadership. Don't focus on perfection, focus on excellence. Nobody expects you to be perfect. What they do expect you to do is show up and do your very best work, to be authentic, to be real, to admit mistakes. That they do expect, and that's a reasonable expectation. But nobody expects you to be perfect. So get perfection out of the way. Perfection is the enemy of progress. Focus instead on excellence, and don't worry so much about how you're going to be judged, because that judgment comes and goes. What people will really judge you by and ultimately remember you through is how you made them feel. How you made them feel in your relationships, and also how you made them feel in terms of interacting with them through thick and thin. And sometimes we remember because those memories are what we call episodic memories. They're embedded deeply in our brains. We remember them well, vividly, with context. So if I'm going through a struggle and you're going through it with me, I'll remember that a lot more and a lot better than regular day-to-day kinds of interactions. So those are the moments that you really have the opportunity to shine. If everything's going smoothly, so maybe you got lucky, it's not an indication of anything. But if you had challenges and you overcame those challenges, that's where you really differentiate yourself. So let's continue. Number four, the fourth and final element of overcoming fear in leadership is that when you have fear-based leadership, it creates fear-based teams. And this is very important. I know we talked about it briefly before. A fear-based team is a team that's afraid to make mistakes. They basically mimic or copy your lead. So if you're afraid to make mistakes, if you're not open to acknowledging it, if you're so controlling because you're afraid of what might happen if you let go, others will do the same. And what's going to happen as a result of that? Teams will avoid risk. People won't be honest with you because they're afraid of what that honesty will open up. It might open up criticism or something negative. And they'll start to rely heavily on blame. People will look to other reasons as to why this happened rather than owning it. And companies and organizations that have a culture where people are risk averse, they're afraid to take risks, they're not being honest because they know that honesty gets punished, and they're also they're very blame oriented. So that takes a very significant emotional toll on a team. And ultimately, it stunts growth, right? But if you lead with transparency, if you lead with courage, and if you lead with humility, then what happens is you're creating a culture where it's about progress. It's not about perfection. If you show up every day making progress, if you show up every day saying, how can we make today a little bit better than yesterday? I just saw a video by Bill Ackman talking about this when he was dealing with personal challenges and corporate challenges. He basically said to himself, I can't change it all at once, but if I focus today and every day on a little bit of progress, I will ultimately get me and us back to a good place. And that's exactly what he did. And now he experiences tremendous success. So let's remember that if we, instead of avoiding failure, instead of worrying about failure, embrace failure. Embrace it as an opportunity to grow. Embrace it as a way by which to improve and to think differently and to expand your horizons. If you do those things on a consistent basis, you're going to be in a much, much better place, and you'll consistently see growth because no challenge will be too big. No situation will be too limiting. You're not going to be focused primarily on what it means for you, but rather what it means for us. Everybody will appreciate it. Everybody will go to bat for you. And ultimately, you'll have much, much greater success. So at this point, now that I've shared that information, I'm curious. Tell me, have you ever experienced this? Let me give you some examples. Maybe you're a leader and you feel the fear. Or maybe you're a team member and you watch it show up. You feel it show up in others. But you see your leader is so afraid to make mistakes that as a result, they don't take risks, or they shut things down, or they take on too much and they don't give others opportunity. Those are important considerations. And I'm wondering, has any of this happened to you? Have you experienced this firsthand? And if so, what have you done about it? Have you done anything about it? Thank you, Blessing, for your comment here, right? Instead of worrying about failure, embrace it, right? That's excellent. Yes, right? We have to embrace the concept. Obviously, you don't want to fail all the time. You want to get it right. We get that. But we have to be willing to allow failure to be part and parcel of what we do. Otherwise, like I said, we restrict everybody. So again, if you're a leader and you have this fear, drop a comment, right? I've admitted to having this problem. I imagine most leaders do. There's no shame in admitting that you have failed or that you're afraid to fail. And I ask you, is there something you're willing to let go of, even if it's difficult, so that you can empower others and just allow yourself less fear, right? Sometimes if you're afraid of something, you just have to take a step. You're afraid of swimming, you got to dip your feet in the water. There's some kind of action. It doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be something concrete and specific that's going to move you in the right direction. And that's what I'm asking everybody to consider. And if you're a direct report, if you report up to somebody who has these challenges, how have you felt working with such a person? Have you led up? Have you guided them in some kind of way? Have you given them honest feedback? That's one of the things, by the way, that I encouraged my team to do. I also encouraged people to call me out on it. And I do this whenever I do trainings as well. I said, you've got to, as a leader, create a culture of delegation. You've got to create a culture where mistakes are allowed. Because if you don't, and if you don't give your people permission to call you out when you're too controlling or not trusting enough or too worried, then you probably will stay in that little shield of yours, a little bubble, and others will too. And nobody benefits. Nobody benefits when you do that. So I'm going to pause for a moment here and just give you an opportunity to share any other comments, any other feedback. I'd love to hear from you. How have you experienced this, if you have, and how have you grown from it? Okay, I'm going to continue to look out for those comments, but in the meantime, let's wrap up the formal part of today's presentation. So number one, fear of failure is not a weakness. It's a sign that you care deeply. That's the good news, right? If you didn't care, you wouldn't be fearful. However, it does have some serious implications. It definitely will shrink your impact, right? Your impact will be reduced if you are afraid all of the time of doing things and trying something different. So you don't have to pretend. You don't have to pretend to be perfect. You don't have to pretend to be an effective leader at all times. You could just be you. And you have to be willing to walk in and admit, I'm not even sure I know what I'm doing, but I'm trying my best. And I welcome your feedback, but I'm going to try to guide this in the right direction. And I'm open to hearing new things because I know ultimately we're all going to grow by working through this process together. Remember, the best leaders don't hide from failure. They grow through it. I meant to bring my book with me, Becoming the New Boss, just to show it to you, but I really wanted to do it because that book, which I think is a pretty good book, check it out, it's on Amazon. That book could not have been written without the many mistakes that I made as a head of school. There's no way. I tell people all the time, the coaching work that I do today could never happen, certainly not with the effectiveness that I believe it does, without the many mistakes that I made and the willingness to acknowledge them and to improve. So don't hide from failure, grow through it. If you do that and you give your teams permission to do the same, you will see significant calmness, relaxation, a better culture, a happier and more comfortable environment, happier people, more committed, more engaged, and ultimately growth through those processes. Because again, that's where the growth happens, not by just doing what I did yesterday, pushing out of my comfort zone. And we can only do that by being willing to try new things that very well may fail. So thank you for joining me today. I hope that you got a lot out of this live. Stay committed to leadership that builds trust, that encourages risk, that learns from mistakes, and models courage for others. And if you do that, lead forward, you will lead forward with all the fear and ultimately have great success. Thanks again. It's been an absolute pleasure. And one last comment here. Thank you, Blessing, for your comment. I admit that I'm afraid of failure as a leader and as a person. Over time, I have, and I'm still learning how to delegate responsibilities and be transparent. Awesome. Yeah, that's really, really important. I think all of us who start to be more transparent, delegate more, empower others, it'll be easier work for us too, but it's certainly going to make such an impact on those that we lead, both in terms of their actual work and also modeling the kind of culture that you want to create. And it always starts at the top. So remember just how important that is. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much again for your time. And we'll be doing this again next week. 11 o'clock on Tuesdays. So please make sure that you are with me, 11 o'clock Eastern US. Please make sure that you are with me for each live so we can engage together and really grow as leaders.